The top stories: democracy promotion expert urges America to stop supporting TPLF for national peace. And American-based religious fathers denounce fabricated news stories regarding Ethiopia. Hello, many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. President Sahle-Work Zewde made an opening statement at the Global Education meeting co-hosted by President of France Emmanuel Macron and Director General of UNESCO Audrey Azoulay. The president dedicated her efforts as chair of the International Commission on the Futures of Education to all women, especially to Ethiopian women who are bearing the brunt of armed conflict. On the occasion, she called for an increased investment in education to enhance access to all, particularly women. President Sahle-Work praised members of the Commission for their unwavering commitment over the past 2 years, adding that wealth of knowledge, rich experience, and ability of members to reach consensus have brought fruition. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called on Ethiopians to put their collective effort to build a strong nation. Nation building is a collective effort. Each one of us plays a critical role in Ethiopia's success. Let's continue building on this effort, the Premier tweeted.
የደርግ መሪ የነበሩት ኮሎኔል መንግስቱ እንዴት ካገር ወጡ የሚለው ጉዳይ በራሱም ቢጠና የዚሁ የማጭበርበር ውጤት አካል እንደሚሆን ጥርጣሬ የለኝም።
በዚህ ነው በእኛ ጊዜ ከጀርባ ያያለፉ ያ ተይዟል ይሄ ተይዟል አዲስ አበባ ገብተናል ይያሉ ወደ ውስጥ ያለውን ሰራዊት ራሱ የማባባት አሁንም ለመጠቀም የሚሞክሩት ይሄንን ነው።
Religious fathers who happened to be in Ethiopia chastised international media outlets for propagating wrong narratives about Ethiopia. Their recent report about the encirclement of Addis Ababa by insurgents was aimed at creating panic, said the religious fathers, adding that Addis Ababa is safe and calm. Kasahun Chane has this report.
What I want people to know is that if they're out and about like us, they can see that it's peaceful and it's safe, and it's because the government is doing an excellent job of maintaining the peace. There are policemen and there are authorities around, and the Ethiopian citizens are also being vigilant to keep watch over their city.
Pastor Johnson Peterson is in Addis having a good time. He says a recent report of international media outlets about Addis Ababa is part of the ongoing Western media wrong narratives on Ethiopia to force the country both for external interest.
Traveling around has been completely peaceful and people are warm and welcoming, so it was quite surprising for me to hear reports from other news agencies talking about riots and violence, and that made no sense to me because I have been around the whole city. In fact, we drove right past the peace rally, and everyone was peaceful and supportive of the government and supportive in a peaceful way of the united Ethiopian country. And so it like I said, it's surprising the narrative that is being told by others, because that is not at all what it is here on the ground. I feel very safe, very welcome being here in Ethiopia.
Binyam Wolde-Tensai, on his part, reproached some Western media outlets for the intensified false propaganda against Ethiopia.
This time, you know, our missionaries, when they come here, they witnessed and they observed, you know, what's going on in Addis Ababa. As you know, the news media of the Western world are trying to mar the identity of our country. And it's not only that, their fabricated stories and false narratives are hurting Ethiopia and the Ethiopian people. So, which is completely heartbreaking. But the truth is, Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, is very peaceful.
Blaming some media houses that are bent on disseminating gloomy pictures, false narratives and creating hysteria, Johnson Peterson accentuated that the people should walk on the truth to protect the nation.
Every nation is exalted when righteousness is exalted. And when a nation is built upon justice and truth, it advances that nation. And so if Ethiopia and the rest of the nations of the world are going to rise up and be stronger, it has to be based on truth. And that's something that is not happening. You know, journalists, many of them seek truth. And so I would encourage the ones that actually seek truth to come and walk around like I did, because they would see something very different than some that are producing a false narrative.
Rigorous fake news reports are manifestations of their hidden agenda towards the country.
Yeah, my personal opinion about, those journalists, the Western journalists or the news media, they have their own motives. I cannot tell you what kind of motives they have deeply, but I know that they are reporting something untrue. There must be some wrong motive behind it. Obviously, everybody knows that. But, you see, I don't know where they get their sources. As I told you earlier, it breaks my heart when I see missionaries like me, like my brothers, trying to flee the country because they think the city is in danger, which is not true.
The religious fathers urged the media to respect their profession, which is all about telling the truth.
Biden's policy towards Ethiopia simply sustains America's bias towards TPLF dating back to the Clinton time. The Biden administration should therefore revise its policy, which supports senior TPLF members that are the root causes of the conflict in Ethiopia. Democracy promotion expert and author David Steinman made these remarks in his exclusive interview with ETV English. Shifa Raulako reports.
How should Sir Biden's policy be revised when it comes to Ethiopia so that the two nations may sustain their centuries-old relationship?
The policy reflects what I believe is a long-standing bias in favor of the TPLF that has lingered in the State Department ever since the Clinton era. The TPLF spent many millions of dollars that it had embezzled from Ethiopia's poor on influence campaigns in the West. They hired a lot of lobbyists, public relations people, and in addition, senior TPLF officials, in particular Meles Zenawi and Tedros Adhanom, were very good at forming close personal relationships with foreign diplomats and journalists. I believe that this influence campaign was a primary element in the U.S. policy towards Ethiopia ever since the TPLF got into power, and it helped the United States to overlook many international crimes that the TPLF was committing. I don't think that's the only reason for the U.S. policy over all those years, but it was certainly part of it. And this institutionalized prejudice in favor of the TPLF, I believe, continues until today, especially considering that there are Clinton-era holdovers or officials who have now returned to the Biden administration. And in particular, Dr. Susan Rice, but also, Secretary of State Blinken and others. And the current policy that Ambassador Feltman is advocating, I believe, reflects this pro-TPLF bias.
You also argue that the Biden administration should stand firmly with the Ethiopian government in return for fresh concessions on humanitarian access, human rights, and other issues. But apparently, the administration has been reluctant so far. What have you observed here?
I think that the American idea that the fighting is simply going to stop and that is going to be a stepping stone towards some type of a permanent solution is flawed, because it envisions the survival of the TPLF in its present form, at least with its present senior leadership. And as long as the senior TPLF leadership remains, I don't believe that Ethiopia can ever move forward, will not have any stability, because their goal, the senior TPLF leaders' goal, is to destabilize Ethiopia in order to regain power and regain their corrupt control over the national economy. So the U.S. Plan right now, which includes the survival of the senior TPLF leadership in place, is only going to lead in the long term to further instability. It's not going to solve anything. Therefore, I think a transactional approach in which Ethiopia winds up with greater support will help it get this war over with sooner and faster. Policy change that I'm advocating, I believe, will help end the war sooner, but will also see the end of the TPLF in its present form with its present leadership, therefore more likely to lead to a permanent security improvement that the present policy does not offer.
Sidama Techula omwe Ada batemwe Techula omwe Ada batemwe Techula omwe Ada batemwe Techula omwe Ada batemwe Eshategesha Fire, 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 fire Sidama fire, Sidama fire Fire, 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 fire Sidama.
Came to Awasa to see two things, well, actually three. And crocodiles, three.
Not dangerous. Maybe if you want to get it, you can.
Ce mi-e frică că ne-au dat vestele astea, eu știu să not, dar nu știu să not lângă hipopotami.
Awasa for the lake. This huge freshwater reservoir is a biosphere's paradise. Hippos, crocodiles, monkeys and a lot of birds. You won't run out of things to photograph.
It's
view. Let us show you how it looks like. It's so beautiful, calm. We are sitting. Provide life jackets that Linda is showing towards me. Is it a life jacket or a weapon?
Welcome back again. You're watching Addis News Hour. The U.S. and its allies have launched an integrated campaign against Ethiopia through their giant media outlets and humanitarian organizations to tarnish the image of the East African nation. The integrated campaign is a direct attack to the government and people of Ethiopia. In a virtual interview with ETV English, Umud Ujulu, chief of Gambela State, says interference of some Western countries, and the U.S. in particular, on Ethiopia's internal affair is absolutely unacceptable, as Ethiopia is a sovereign nation. Umud stressed their undue pressure also has no legal ground.
The act of the Western country, meaning interfering in the Ethiopian affairs, is totally out of law, which cannot be expected from such country or from such developed country like America and the alike. By now, we know that the administration of Biden and some opposition group who are living there in America, we know what they are doing. But because we are a sovereign country, we can defend our country by ourselves. No one can oblige us, or no one can force us to do something which is not our interest. So we have a right to protect our country. Then we can struggle with them. They cannot interfere in our affair.
The chief added some international media outlets have been trying to support the TPLF through propagating fake news against Ethiopia, contrary to the objective reality.
These news and propaganda are out of reality, because we know what is on the ground here in Ethiopia. Even those who are there, they know what is here in Ethiopia. So they are doing what is not expected from them. But because we know our situation, the problem in Ethiopia, we know is our problem. We are averting it by different means. Even if they release unnecessary news and propaganda, we should not surprise of that, because we are doing our part in every aspect to avert the condition or the problem that is facing us.
Former ambassadors of the U.S. to Ethiopia, Tibor Nagy and Donald Booth, stated that the ongoing attempts of external powers to interfere in the internal affairs of Ethiopia would not bring solution to the current situation in Ethiopia. Foreign meddling will bring nothing other than worsening the situation, the U.S. diplomats underscored. They underlined that Ethiopians have to narrow their differences with dialogue and other peaceful mechanisms to address the ongoing dispute. Ethiopians will never kneel for external pressures, as their history clearly indicates. The only mechanism which is needed much to address their current circumstances is a domestic solution that must be led by Ethiopians themselves, the diplomat said. They further called on the international community to facilitate conducive environment for Ethiopians in order to enable them address their problems by their own means. In business news, the U.S. has put in place preconditions to be fulfilled by the government of Ethiopia if the country is to remain eligible in AGOA. Needless to say, the premature manufacturing sector will experience difficulties if worse comes to worst. Social entrepreneurs are calling for swift policy reforms to encourage democratic use of Ethiopian products and find other markets to cope with the problem. Haptamu Ashagri has more.
AGOA has become a weapon for the US to twist hands of the government, as the Opportunity Act is vital for export trade. The US recently announced to suspend Ethiopia from the act unless certain preconditions are fulfilled, despite government's citing vulnerability of the poor. Talking to it in English, Kibret Abebe, president of Ethiopian Social Enterprises, said professional diplomacy is critical to reverse the decision.
We need to have a very professional diplomacy. I'm a very, as I told you, as a person who is really following the politics seriously, that our diplomacy should be led by professionals. I argue that the Ethiopians, for the last 13 years, this very sensitive industry is being run by politicians, activists, who fail in the country to be sent abroad and to be a diplomat. This is shame on us. Like, this shouldn't be done. Diplomacy, as my knowledge is concerned, is a very professional, as we see it clearly from the recent diplomats. So I'm arguing that this should be handled in a very professional manner.
If worse comes to worst, Kibret said the country should tap its domestic market through the encouragement of social enterprises.
Social enterprise need to have a business model that makes them making an impact and making a profit at the same time, so that this model creates sustainable solution. So that rather than counting living in Ethiopia just every social problem as the curse, as a social enterprise, this is an opportunity for youth to get employed and to make their life better.
New policy frameworks should be introduced to give more space for social enterprises, thereby minimizing market vulnerability, Kibret said.
Ethiopia doesn't have any legal framework for social entrepreneurs. Like, I am being treated by the, for example, by the custom authority, like I am an ordinary person who is making money. So whatever life you save, the income authority will never say that you are saving life, that you are making money. So unless and otherwise this country have a room for such social entrepreneurs, it will lose a lot of things. In education, IT, housing, transportation, agriculture, health, in every sector. So the country should have legislation that potentially help social entrepreneurs. As per a study by the British Council, there are more than 55,000 social entrepreneurs in this country.
Ethiopia has still a chance to remain in AGOA if things can be sorted out through diplomatic efforts.
And finally, United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is set to hold talks with President of Kenya Uhuru Kenyatta as he starts his Africa tour from Nairobi.